Addiction. What does it really mean, and why is there even such a thing? Let's hear what my guest has to say as he shares about an atypical approach he took to healing body, mind, and spirit. Christian Biedrzycki, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you have a very interesting story about addiction. Do you want to tell us where that started and how you got to doing what you do now?
Yeah, it uh it started with a lot of childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my dad was an addict and a criminal. He had me sell drugs for him at a pretty young age.
Sure.
And I was in school, but outside of school, I was like out in the streets. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of lived this like double life,
Mm-hmm.
which was a lot of identity issues. But I had a I had some health issues when I went away to college, and I was prescribed opioids and benzodiazepines at 18 years of age. And then from that point forward, I struggled with both of those types of medications.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you started doing it for medical reasons.
Yeah, I was familiar with oxys and morphine and Xanax before I had
Mm,
ever taken them because of my father. But
mm,
yeah, when they were prescribed to me, I finally understood why they were in such high demand, and eventually it turned into heroin, which turned into fentanyl, and then I got into meth, and then I was importing drugs from all over the world, via the dark web, and yeah, eventually I was homeless, and holding a cardboard sign on the side of the freeway.
sure. What a moving story, Christian. Wow.
Thank
And that's the road down which drugs and addiction take us, hey? Mm,
Absolutely. And I was, prior to meeting my real father, I was, a good kid, student body president and
mm.
band, academics, athletics. I got into college on a full ride scholarship, and
Wow.
yeah, I lost everything. I mean, I
Sure.
come from nothing, so the fact that I'm even successful today still blows my mind. My dad's deceased.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry for your loss, Christian.
Thank you. He overdosed on my 30th birthday, actually.
Wow.
That
Sure.
was that was the catalyst to my healing journey.
Mm. I'd love to hear more about that, but can we take a step back? I want to just ask you, you said you went from one drug to the other, to the other, to the other. What is your take on something that we hear so often that alcohol is the gateway to the other drugs, or weed, marijuana is the gateway to other drugs? How does one go from one to the other to the next, or stronger and stronger and stronger? How does that work?
I personally feel as though alcohol is the ultimate gateway drug because every time I tried anything else, I was already drinking. So
Okay.
the
Mm-hmm.
first time I tried heroin, I had already been drinking.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I tried um, Xanax, like other than my clonazepam prescription, I had been drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as far as, marijuana and psychedelics go, I feel as though those are exit drugs. Those drugs have medicinal and healing properties.
Mm-hmm. Exit drugs. What do you mean by that?
So I went to, detox and rehab and sober living and the psych ward collectively close to 50 times. And
Well, yeah.
yeah, and I couldn't stay clean because of pre-existing modalities of treatment. They weren't doing anything for me.
Mm.
So what I did was this time around, I was introduced to psilocybin mushrooms, and
Mm-hmm.
I used psilocybin mushrooms, transcendental meditation, and medicinal cannabis to get my life together.
Okay, so if you call that an exit drug, that means to exit the addiction, so to speak, to get out of that, to heal from that.
Yes, that was to me the most effective method
Mm,
to treat not only the substance use disorder, but also the traumatic childhood that I had.
yes, that's interesting. There are many interesting connections to be made between trauma, especially early childhood trauma, but all kinds of trauma all through life and the use of substances. In your own experience, is there something you can share with us about that? How does one get into starting or using it for the first time? You mentioned that you'd already been drinking when you used it for the first time, but how does that happen? Is it in a social context? Do you have an innate need to try it? Was it curiosity? What is it?
Um, I mean, I was raised around drugs and alcohol. Like I said, my real father was a drug addict and an alcoholic. My adoptive father was a meth addict and a pot smoker.
Mm,
My mom's current husband is an alcoholic. So nobody had really ever explained to me that substances had consequences.
mm,
The first time I drank, I was like 9 years old, and it was given to me by an adult.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure. That is shocking. That is so irresponsible, hey? So if you growing up in an environment where it's the norm, it's the done thing, people drink and use drugs, there's no way to tell that there's anything different.
correct. My real father was the one that taught me how to um, inject heroin, how to sell drugs, how to stay out of trouble with the police. So that's all that I knew.
Mm,
But I was also told stay in school and make money outside of school however you can. So those were my core beliefs as a kid.
hmm
Was work, money, and school. And when I say work, I mean, engaging in illegal activity.
mm, mm. And Christian, if I may ask, your mother, what was her role in this? Did she also use substances or not?
Uh, no, my mom is a very codependent enabler. She just somehow links up with, toxic, abusive men. And
Hmm
even though I would go to my mom and say, these are what these men are doing to me, for whatever reason, my mom never did anything to defend me. My mom was mostly absent from my life. Like I was getting myself to and from school at 9 years of age. I ran away from home at 14.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And how old are you now?
I'm 33 now.
30. And if you ran away from home at 14, can you give us a bit of a timeline? When did you turn around and heal from the use of the drugs to where you are now?
Um, I mean, the first time I went to rehab, I was 25,
Hmm
and I would get a little bit of time and then I would relapse because, like the 12-step community was never enough for me.
hmm
Um, it I never did anything about the trauma. So no, there was no amount of therapy, no amount of, meetings, no amount of socializing that was going to help with the underlying issues.
mm
But my healing journey, like from the actual trauma, that began about a year and a half ago
Okay.
because I had tried to get off of drugs multiple times with limited success, and I would always go back to what was comfortable because I never did anything about the inner conflict.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I recently did an interview with somebody else who's a recovering addict who's been helping other people on the similar journey for, I think, 12 or more years. And she maintains that childhood trauma is the root of addiction. And then until we address that, we won't be able to solve the problem or solve the issue. So I'm glad to hear that you agree to that, with that to a large degree. So the underlying trauma we have to address. And how did you do that? With talk therapy, with other things? How did you address the trauma?
Yeah, psilocybin mushrooms, a lot of introspection.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it by myself behind closed doors. And then I would journal about the experience afterward, or I would, talk with some friends about the things that I had uncovered and discovered. And I truly believe that as far as trauma goes, psilocybin mushrooms are the most effective form of treatment, which is why I'm a psychedelic assisted therapist.
Okay. So tell me more about that because it's fascinating. You mentioned that you've been in rehab so many times. So is it safe for me to assume that in the rehab context, you must have had some therapy or some group sessions and things? So there was some therapy which you found did not help. And then you find the psilocybin helped. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that is 100% accurate. I went to a lot of rehabs, some of the best in the country,
Mm,
um, some state funded ones, some
mhm,
that, resembled homeless shelters. I did a lot of therapy with high level, very, intelligent, experienced therapists.
mm,
That whole industry is like human trafficking. They're billing insurance for a lot of money. They house
mhm,
you for 30, 60, or 90 days, and then they send you back to the environment in which, like, you were traumatized and abused. And of,
mm.
of course, you don't stay sober because you just hang out for 30, 60, or 90 days. You don't, that's not enough time to actually address like the underlying issues.
Yeah.
And I did that for 10 years.
Well, I know from personal experience people close to me that went to rehab and some clients that I've supported through it as well. The feedback that people have given me is absolutely horrendous. Someone said to me jokingly that the rehab is the best place to get drugs because the people have figured out all the tricks in the book. So you go into rehab, but you still have a supply because people know how to smuggle it in and that sort of stuff. That was one response. Somebody else that I accompanied on a journey of rehabilitation, which I might say also did not succeed, said that those group sessions and all those talk sessions and things are pointless because it doesn't really address the real issues. So I've had very negative feedback from rehab centers, so to speak, the traditional way of treating addiction. And we know from newer research and some of the experts in the world who deal with addiction that it is about the trauma, it is about some underlying issues, early childhood trauma mostly, and we have to address it. Now, there are many ways to address it and overcome that. Can you share with us what the psilocybin does for you? You mentioned that you journaled about the experiences and things. How does that link to you not taking the drugs anymore, stopping the substances? How does that happen? Because if I can compare it to talk therapy, you can figure it out in your brain, make a decision that you're going to stop doing it, and then you stop doing it for as long as you can manage to maintain that until you relapse or something. How do you go from using psilocybin to saying, no, I'm not going to use that substance?
Um, so I had already been off of excuse me. I had already been off of, the fentanyl, the Xanax, and the meth for like 3 months before I was
Mhm,
introduced to psilocybin.
mhm,
And basically what it allowed me to do was look at all of my trauma from a third person perspective. It
okay.
it allowed me to take a step back and look at everything that happened to me
Mm,
and understand that what happened to me was not my fault.
mm,
I was a victim, but it also allowed me to forgive my perpetrators, all
mhm,
without re-experiencing the traumatic memories, all the stuff that I was unwilling to look at because it was
Mm.
all so painful, it
Mm.
allowed me to take a look at it without re-experiencing it.
Okay, I see. Well, that's wonderful. That's ideal, actually, because we don't want to re-traumatize.
And that's
Uh,
what a lot of therapy does is, different
yes.
forms of therapy, you have to have a catharsis in order to, let a traumatic experience go. But with
Mm.
psilocybin, it doesn't have to be like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are now a therapist yourself.
I'm in school right now, which
Okay.
I don't know very many recovered addicts that get to go to graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super grateful for the opportunity. But yeah, I am in school right now for clinical social work, trauma, grief, and addiction.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And how did you manage to get in?
Well, I am really smart, and I finished an undergraduate degree while I was using opioids and benzos, and I
Wow.
I did very
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So I don't know, I looked at my 20s and I just decided like, dude, I love school. It was the only place I ever felt safe when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I just applied. I was honest in the interview application, or excuse me, the admission application about everything that I had been through. And I actually my application got sent back to me by like the director of admissions, and she was like, "Okay, I need you to fix this, this, and this, and then resubmit it. I need you in my school." And
Wow.
I was like, "Whoa, what?" Because that was weird to me because I didn't understand how
Mm.
influential or like inspiring my story was yet.
Mm.
And I I I fixed those things. I resubmitted it. I got in. It's not a high six or it's not a high acceptance rate, and I have a 4.0 GPA right now.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
fantastic. Well done. And I hope you do well all the way through. Wow. What a beautiful story of healing and recovery. I'm so grateful that you agreed to share it with us. Thank you so much, Christian. I want
Thank you.
to ask, how do you, because we connected on LinkedIn, I believe, and I see that you share much of your story and you've become somewhat of an activist speaking out about these things.
Yeah.
What drives you, apart from your own lived experience, that I know is going to be very, very valuable for anybody else that you help? Because you've been there, you've done that more than once, and you've been in the trenches and you're out of it now, which I'm very grateful for. But what drives you today to now go and study this and help other people?
This is where I get emotional.
Mhm.
Um, I just don't want anybody to felt the way that I felt growing up,
Mm.
if I can help that.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah, and you know you've experienced it firsthand, eh?
Yeah.
Sure.
I've had a very hard life. I have no idea how I'm still alive, um, or optimistic, or I still have empathy. I still have compassion because given what I've been through, like I don't know how I'm not dead or in prison or, like a
Mm.
diagnosed psychopath. Like I still have a full spectrum of emotions, which is like unheard of.
Mm. Mm. And I know, especially you mentioned heroin also, some of the really hard drugs, if I can call it like that, the recovery rate from that is very, very low. So it's nothing short of a miracle that you are where you are today, really.
Fentanyl is a 1.1 to 2.2%
Mm.
success rate. I lost my dad to an overdose, my best friend, my fiance, and
Sure.
everybody that I got clean with in the past, all to either drug-related suicides or overdoses. And I'm the last man standing, which I don't understand how.
Mm. Wow. What a tremendous amount of loss also. I mean, that's new trauma in your adult life on top of everything else.
Yeah, my fiance committed suicide when I was like 3 months clean. and I stayed clean through that with no support from anybody.
Sure. Wow. I'm so sorry for your tremendous losses. I will just acknowledge that, Christian. Wow.
Thank you.
And having stayed clean through that incredible experience, what can you say in hindsight now was it that helped you stay clean and not just relapse, not just fall back or give up, lose all hope and just say, well, what's the point?
Um, on December 2nd of 2023, I was in the midst of a pretty bad relapse,
Mm-hmm,
after having, almost 2 years of sobriety, but I was on, medication assisted treatment at the time, so it wasn't, complete abstinence.
mm-hmm,
I was in the midst of a relapse. I had just gotten off of that medication, and I was in my old apartment, and I was a mess. I had just missed Thanksgiving. Um, it was just really bad, and I was contemplating a fifth suicide attempt.
mm-hmm,
And instead of acting on, the urge to harm myself, I got on my hands and knees and I prayed to a God that I didn't believe existed. I was an atheist. I didn't believe in spirituality or universal laws or anything like that.
mm-hmm.
And something answered that day.
Sure.
And I walked out of that bedroom like spiritually aware for the first time in my life. And so I clung to my faith every time things got hard.
Mm. Wow. I've got goosebumps sitting here. Isn't
It
it
still blows me
amazing?
away.
Yeah. Wow. And that carried you through. Because the next thing I wanted to ask you is how do you know that this time around it's for real, it's for good, it's going to last?
Um, the day I turned my will and my life over to the care of, a creator or the universe, whatever you want to call it, um,
Mm-hmm,
things effortlessly fell into place. I got into graduate school. I started a business. I started operating from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. I
mm-hmm.
learned how to manifest. I can sense energies and I can pick up on intentions. So I've become like a high-ranked spiritualist, and that is the driving force behind all of my success.
Wow.
Yeah. I
That's
have no,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it blows my mind. I see and feel things that I don't think everybody sees and feels.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. Fascinating. Christian, can I ask you, now that you are where you are in your life journey and you've obviously made major changes, where are the adults that you had in your childhood that traumatized you? Are they still in your life? Do they still feature? You did mention that your dad overdosed on your birthday, so he's no longer here. But the other people in your life, do you still have them in your life? And if you do, what are your relationships like?
Um, so my real father was my biggest perpetrator.
Mm-hmm,
I actually I don't like saying this, but it's the truth. I'm glad he's dead because he
mm-hmm,
can't hurt me ever again.
mm-hmm.
My adoptive father, my mom's first husband, he is no longer on methamphetamine, so he is a better dude than he was when I was growing up. He's not really doing anything with his life, so I don't talk to him or see him very often, but
Mm,
we're cool. And then my mom and her alcoholic husband are still married and, in a very dysfunctional marriage. So I've just had to set some very firm boundaries with both of them and both of my siblings. Like I can't be around the people who are unwilling to take ownership of what belongs to them and take accountability for their actions.
mm,
The
mm,
neglect and abuse, they won't validate my experience, and I don't need them to, but it would be nice if they would say like, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes because like I definitely did.
mm. And your siblings, do they also use substances?
No, I think I made enough mistakes for my whole family.
Mm-hmm,
Um, my sister's in nursing school. My little brother is working on an engineering degree.
mm-hmm,
So when my mom married her current husband, um, she left her first husband, which was, the abusive addict, and she got into another codependent relationship with an alcoholic, but at least he's functional and
mm-hmm,
he makes good money. And she also like was able to um, become a C-level executive. So she makes good money too. So my siblings have it made. Neither of them have ever had to work a day in their life. And I'm glad that, things have been easier for them. But
mm.
for whatever reason, I just don't get a whole lot of support or encouragement from my mom or her husband.
That must be really hard. Sad, actually. Disappointing, eh?
It is. I think my mom resents me because she had me when she was 18.
Mm,
And my mom, is very smart, very hardworking. She had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to take care of herself and me, without my father in the picture and with an
mm,
abusive, a drug addicted husband in the picture. So I think she secretly resents me, especially with as successful as I am now. She didn't help me with any of this. I've never asked her for anything.
mm. That's a very difficult thing being someone's child if they firstly won't be held accountable for their role or their part in our trauma, and then if they don't support us in our healing and our growth process, that's very challenging. It's actually painful, and I think for some of us it's a yet another trauma. It's another level of rejection if our parents don't acknowledge, or like you said, don't validate our experience and what we do with it, the work that we do, and how we, forge a new way forward, like you have done.
It is it's rejection, betrayal, and abandonment all at the same time,
Mm,
which are archetypal wounds.
yeah.
I had to process the traumas myself and just accept the fact that my mom is a very sick person. Um,
Mm,
I'll meet up with her occasionally, like we'll have conversations, but they're very superficial.
mm,
My mom has been through a lot, like we kind of grew up together. So if anything, we're more like friends. I don't really view her as like my mom. Uh sorry, my phone was ringing. I've never really viewed her as my mother because we are so close in age.
mm, mm.
Yeah, she's more like a toxic ex-girlfriend. I was always, so there's a process called parentification where a parent,
Yes.
yeah, my mom parentified me. I was basically a full-grown man at the age of 9, and
Mm,
she relied so heavily on me that I had no choice but to grow up and then take care of my siblings. And I've just had to let her know that, like, look, dude, like, I'm not your emotional support. Like, I'm your son. if we can't have a mother-son relationship, like we're gonna keep it casual, but like, your dysfunctional marriage is your problem. It's not my problem.
Yeah. Something that resonates with me quite a bit, similar to my own experience, is the parentification, um, and how that affects the relationship with siblings. If if we grew up in the same household with the older child being parentified, then later in adult life, it very much dictates how the relationship is. I've seen it for myself, and I've seen it with many of my clients, that dynamic doesn't change. That expectation from the younger siblings for this other sibling to remain in a kind of parent role doesn't go away. It takes hard work and sometimes firm boundaries for that parentified child to say, I am not your parent, I'm also your sibling. Like you said, now you had to say to your mom, I want a parent-child relationship with you. You have to say to your siblings also, I want to have a sibling relationship with you. I'm not a parent. Have you found that applicable to you as well?
Absolutely. My sister and I are 9 years, apart, and my little brother and I are 16 years apart. So I mean, I
Mm.
am old enough to be my little brother's father.
You are actually, yeah,
And I have always been more of a father to him than his actual father because his father is too busy drinking and gambling.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, they do call me big bro, and they do view me as their older brother. But my little sister's dad was never in the picture. My little
Mm,
brother's dad is there physically, but he's not, mentally or emotionally supportive. So
mm,
I kind of have no choice but to be the one who teaches these kids about, life and hard work and school and finances and dating and, God and spirituality. Like it is what it is because they're not going to get it from either of their fathers.
wow. And that's a huge responsibility that you're taking on that's not actually yours to carry.
It is what it is. Like I love those kids.
Mm,
I would do anything for those kids. I protected them when there was domestic violence in the house and
mm,
um, when my mom wasn't around, I love those kids. I mean, boundaries are important, especially for me because I have high expectations and my whole
mm,
family's traumatized. So, when they don't meet those expectations, like if I'm not careful, I get hurt. So I'm
mm.
learning to love everybody like while remaining emotionally detached from them.
Yeah, which is hard to do. It's a skill that we have to actually learn to do to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe, eh?
Yeah, it took a long time for me to get to the point where I can go over there, engage with them, love on them, and then, leave and have my sanity and serenity remain intact.
Mm. And be okay afterwards. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christian, having had your life experience, I'm wondering if you think about this and want to have children of your own.
Well, well, I mean, I've worked with kids, I've dated women with kids. I love my siblings. I would love to be a father, but
Hmm.
I'm 33 now. And, it just seems like women these days, like especially the ones my age, like they either already have kids,
Hmm.
or they've got ex-husbands, or a baby daddy's in the picture. And it's like, I don't want to deal with that because I'm a high value man, I don't want to deal with that. And then when I meet women in their 20s, most of them are super immature and I don't want kids, I'm spoiled and entitled and it's all about me. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to find a traditional woman in her 20s that doesn't really exist anymore. And
Yeah,
I'm not going to I'm not going to find a woman my own age that doesn't have an ex-husband or kids.
sure. Yeah, that makes it difficult.
Yeah, so I just stay single. I just don't have time for it anymore.
Mm. Well, you never know what might come along, hey?
Yeah.
the right person at the right time. I was wondering because I have often heard people say after their own very difficult, traumatic lives that they don't want children or don't want to bring children into this world, which is, also understandably so. It's difficult.
I mean,
So,
I would be a better
yeah.
parent. I would be a better parent to my kids than either of my parents were to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I said, I worked at an autism therapy center with kids
Mm-hmm.
ages 2 to 9, and that was one of the best jobs I've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah. So I could do it if the opportunity presents itself, I will. But right
Mm.
now I'm just focused on school and my business.
Mm. Well, that's fantastic. So, I asked you earlier what makes this time around different for you, and you did explain. But I'm wondering if you ever you said the last year and a half has actually been going well for you. Have you had temptations, um, opportunities to use substances again? Have you been tempted at all, or do you live a life that steers clear of those things, steers clear of people who do that?
So yes, I have I have been tempted. Um, I was having a really bad day and I ended up, by an old associate's house, and it was literally down to a left turn or a right turn. And
Mm-hmm,
I went right instead of left. Um, but that moment scared me. I was probably like 6 months clean. And then
mm-hmm,
I just went on a trip a couple days ago, and I was in a hotel by myself, and the front desk staff was adamant about me going into their bar,
mm-hmm,
going in for happy hour. And when I got back to my room, it wasn't about the alcohol, it was more so about the social dynamic.
mm-hmm,
So for a second, I was like, well, maybe I'll just go down to the bar and check it out.
mm,
And then I caught myself and I was like, we're not going to the bar. I've been to the bar in sobriety. It's miserable. Like people that
mm,
drink are miserable.
yeah.
But for a split second, because I was alone in a hotel in another city, I was like, nobody's gonna know, and I guarantee come tomorrow, like I'll be able to, control myself because I can control marijuana and psilocybin, but I would just
Mm,
rather not put anything into my body anymore.
mm, mm,
Yeah. But now I avoid people in recovery even. Like I don't want to hear about drugs or alcohol, period, anymore.
mm, mm-hmm. I would imagine that's the easiest way is to just steer clear of it altogether, not be around it, not be around people who do that, because then there is no temptation. You don't have to be tested all the time because it must be difficult.
I mean, it's really not. The city that I live in, like
Mm,
there's homeless drug addicts on every corner, at every
sure.
bus stop, in every gas station parking lot, in
Mm,
every grocery store parking lot.
wow.
I just when I was done, I was done. I could walk 5 minutes down the street and go get fentanyl right now if I really wanted to, but
Mm,
I lost so much and I've experienced so much pain as a result of, my old lifestyle. It's just like,
mm,
I have reasons to live today.
yeah.
And all,
And I
all
love
over
what you said, you're
nothing.
done with it. You're done with it.
What's that?
I love what you said that you are done with it. You're done. It's not something you do anymore.
It's just not an option. I
Mm,
have people that depend on me. I
mm,
show up for myself. I have school. I have my business. I'm very involved in the community here in Arizona. So that's my dad went out like that. I'm not going out like my dad. I'm nothing like my
mm,
dad. And
mm,
his death is a constant reminder of, what will happen to me if I think that I can
mm.
drink responsibly or responsibly take pain pills. Because that was his thing is, oh, I got it under control. And he never had
Yeah,
it under control.
sure. Well, that's the denial that's always present in this sort of behavior, right?
Yeah, he was a textbook narcissist, psychopath,
Mhm.
sociopath. He couldn't self-reflect, and that's what a lot of these people that are like in recovery,
Mhm.
um, there's a lot of personality disorders, and I,
Mhm.
I don't think most of these people know how to self-reflect. I think they lack the ability to, think critically and analytically, and
Mhm.
look at themselves without having somebody like hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have one up on all my competition.
It's interesting that you say that because we have to start with holding ourselves accountable and taking responsibility for our own actions, eh? If we can't do that, we can't take the next step. That's where it starts.
And that is one of my biggest issue with a lot of these treatment centers and detoxes and sober
Hmm.
livings is that they're run by addicts in recovery, who
Hmm.
aren't even recovered. They're off of the drugs and alcohol, but they still engage in, risky behaviors. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
they're just super petty. They're emotionally stunted, and they see nothing wrong with their behavior. So I just stopped going. I was like, look, man,
Mm.
you guys aren't going to change. You guys are unable to change. And
Mm.
until they experience some cataclysmic event, some catastrophic event, they have no reason to change. So they just hang out at the meeting halls and hang out with each other because they're all toxic. And I was like, I don't want to be around this. Like I'm an
Mm.
adult with a life and a career.
Yeah. It's awesome. I'm so proud of you and what you have accomplished, I have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Christian, what would you say to any youngster these days who's about to start taking drugs? Any drug in a social context, had a couple of drinks and wants to try something. What would you say?
Um, I mean, I would want to have a one-on-one conversation, uh,
Mm.
with essentially my former self and say, look, dude, like I know it's rough at home. I'm sure you don't fit in at school.
Mm.
Kids are assholes, but like come kick it with me and I'll show you that like you don't have to go down the road that I went down.
Yeah,
It's not
beautiful.
worth it. It's just not
Mm.
worth it.
It's not worth it. Yeah. And somebody who, there's so many people, and unfortunately, it's so sad, but there are many people who've been to rehab centers more than once, and they still haven't managed to break through. What would you say to those people?
Try something different. Insanity is defined as doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different outcome. So like
Yeah.
it's no wonder that I got lost in a broken system with outdated modalities of treatment.
Mm.
Psilocybin mushrooms are the most effective modality of treatment when it comes to trauma. And we already know that trauma is the underlying issue when it comes to substance use disorder.
Mhm. Thankfully, we know that now.
Yeah,
And that the
everybody
way
wants
that,
to.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, the way that the rehab centers operate is not effective. It's never been.
No, they
Mm.
they they seem to think addiction is a disease.
Mm.
It's not a disease. It is unresolved childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Um, I have an entire modality of treatment that I recently developed. It's called my empowerment theory model.
Hmm.
I won't bore you with the details of it, but I don't believe addiction is a disease. That's just a way for the treatment centers to make money.
Mm. And
They're
talking about how we define addiction, there is also a school of thought who says it's genetic, it's hereditary. If you have it in the family, it's almost like inevitable. What do you say to that?
I disagree.
Mm.
I know people with stories similar to mine, who both parents were addicts, both parents were alcoholics, that never tried a drink or a drug in their life. Um, it's trauma. And it comes down to, you know, I need a safe space away from my perpetrators because I don't want to be like them. And unfortunately, I became everything my father was, but
Mm.
I didn't know that another way of life existed.
Mm.
I thought it was all about violence, tyranny, control,
Mm.
money, and status. Like that's what I lived for because that's what I grew up around and that's what I thought
mm,
was cool because I never got my dad's love or approval. He just breadcrumbed me my whole life. And
mm,
so like if a man like me can show these young men that there's nothing cool about that. Like I
mm,
get it, dude, you're scared, but like let me show you that there's nothing cool about that lifestyle.
mm, mm.
I
Yeah, no, there isn't. It's absolutely destructive. And unfortunately, it is rife. It is such a big problem. How do
it's
you, please go ahead?
I mean, you see movies where they glorify organized crime and they glorify
Mm,
drug use and they glorify the objectification of women and
mm,
uh it's in pop culture, it's in music, like I thought it was cool, that I was out selling drugs because people needed me for the first time in my life. And people depended on me because I had what they needed. So my phone was
mm.
ringing. That made me think I was cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's such a misplaced solution to a deep underlying need that you actually have, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get affection from either parent, so I got affection from, you know, people that viewed me as a resource because I could
Mm,
provide them with the comfort that they needed. And
mm,
I got off on the power. I'd be lying if I said I didn't.
mm. Wow. I really appreciate your honesty and your open-hearted sharing of your experience, Christian. Thank you so much. I do believe this is very valuable. I'm sure whoever is going to watch this or listen to it is going to find inspiration from your story. Mm.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and I hope that it just gets to where it needs to go and that it helps the people who need it, who need to be helped.
I believe it will, and I believe it always does. It reaches the people that need to hear this. Can I can I ask you in closing, because I know in your social media posts that you speak about your experiences quite openly. What is it in our world today, in our society, that we need to change? If we will ever stand a chance to address this, can I call it an epidemic of substance abuse, of addiction?
Um, well, first and foremost, the system is broken.
Mm,
Uh, the treatment centers, the sober livings, the detoxes, they're all for profit.
mm,
Um, so the system is broken and the modalities of treatment are outdated.
mm,
And then, of course, the people are in pain and
mm,
people will do anything to not have to feel and to not have to sit with themselves, whether it be money, sex, gambling, drugs, alcohol. Um, so it's, I am vulnerable about everything that I've been through in hopes that it will inspire those around me and give them permission to be vulnerable also
mm,
because we
mm,
are only as sick as our secrets. And
mm,
if people see me like crushing it at life while being 100% authentic and transparent, like I'm a revolutionary. It sets off a chain reaction, and then those
mm.
people, they start opening up about what they've been through, and then people see that, oh, well, maybe it is okay to go to therapy. Maybe I can be myself. Too many people are just afraid to be themselves. They don't know who they are.
That is so true. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love what you said. We are only as sick as our secrets. That really hits home. Yeah, we're only as sick as our secrets. And I
Yeah.
would add to that that I think parents need proper training. Parents need to be made aware of how our programming and the generational stuff that we're carrying the trauma and stuff affects our children. We really need to have more helpful parents so that parents can be more aware of how we potentially hurt our children with our own behavioral patterns and our own problems and our own trauma that we don't heal.
I mean, we know this, trauma is inherited and it's ancestral. So, my mom is traumatized. My dad was traumatized.
Mm,
Their parents are traumatized and so on and so forth. I'm
mm,
a cycle breaker, which, I inherited countless generations worth of trauma,
mm,
but I was the one resilient and courageous enough to address all of it. And now I work with kids and families and, people in recovery. And I'm even like teaching my own family how to properly treat me and how to properly treat the other kids.
mm,
And
mm.
it's very challenging. There's a lot of people that rely heavily on me, but somebody's got to do it. I don't know why
Yeah.
the universe selected me to do any of what I'm doing, but I'm grateful that I get to do it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, being a cycle breaker is tough, but it's amazing and needs to be done. And it's also liberating once you realize that you've managed to break some of those cycles. If you look back at the history and the generations of the trauma that has been flooding down because people are ignorant and people are not brave enough or don't have the courage to stand up and say no, and, break those cycles, like you said. It just perpetuates, it just gets passed down from generation to generation. So very proud of you, very grateful that you're breaking those cycles. You have broken those cycles, and you'll probably spend the rest of your life breaking more of them. Christian, thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to chat to you. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your wisdom and your experience.
Thank you so much for having me.